everybody. This is Jason Eagle, your natural health authority, with another Healing Matters podcast and FaceTime and YouTube and that whole thing. Sorry about that noise. So today we are talking about the 8 most common food allergies, and actually a lot more than that, and we're going to go into the different numbers in terms of, now there's different types of what we call allergies. They're broken up into different things. One would be airborne allergies. So a lot of times when typically a person says, I have allergies, they're talking about like ragweed and pollen and that type of stuff. Then there's food allergies, which is what we're talking about today. And then there's allergies, or what's called chemical hypersensitivity. There's another form of that too, which would be energetic allergies, or energetic stimulated EMFs, other types of things. I'm going to get a little bit into that today, but then we get into a breakdown of what we call immune versus intolerance. Well, it's all the immune system. So when we have an allergy, what we're really having is a reaction, and the symptoms that we're having is our immune system. Our immune system is going to battle after something. And I always like to say about the immune system, which is, you know, what we would call autoimmune, people like to say, your immune system's screwed up and we need to turn it off. Well, that's like saying to Lassie, that's just a dumb dog, stop barking. Or like I like to say this analogy too, like the boy who cries wolf who has scratches on him or her. That's not faking. They're not faking. So it's an attack. So it's related to infection, it's related to organ toxicity, it's related to something triggered that, and now the foods are doing that. Although most of the foods, again, we're not really allergic to them. Now, many of the allergies is, okay, we can say it's the food or what's in the food or how was the food grown. So everybody is allergic to what's called glyphosate. So this whole thing about what's called a gluten allergy, 9 times, and my wife can prove this. My wife can absolutely 100% prove this. My wife is extremely allergic to gluten. That would be anything that is wheat, okay? However, that is American wheat, and I can prove this because we went to Belize, and we found this wonderful little shop, this guy from France, and he lives there now, and he opened up a little French brasserie type of thing, and he makes good French bread and croissants and that whole thing, but he has the wheat shipped in from France, and so it's not American wheat. And in America, they use what's called glyphosate or Roundup, and they have Roundup ready seeds, which means they're genetically modified to tolerate the Roundup. Now, but it's used with wheat here in America in a very specific way, which is, in fact, it's against the regulations, but they do it here, which is basically Roundup is stated right on the box when you spray it on your crops, especially edible crops, which is you are to spray it on and then you are to let it stay on and do not harvest the seed for 2 weeks because you need the rain to wash it off. Whereas a lot of wheat is literally sprayed with glyphosate, the Roundup, and then they harvest it 2 days later. Why? Because also glyphosate is what's called a desiccant, meaning that little packet of that thing that dries stuff up that you have in foods and supplements. A desiccant means it dries it up. And so what it does is it causes the heads or the wheat berries that are inside the stalks to dry up and shrink and pull away from the membrane or the skin, so that when the machine, the John Deere machine or whatever that's been engineered for this, because they engineered the seeds for the actual machines, so that they increase their yield. Meaning a desiccant makes, it dries it out, it shrinks it, kind of like sticking your cell phone that you dropped in the water into rice. That's a desiccant. It sucks the water out of it. So it's sucking the water out of the heads, which then makes it, then the machine actually doesn't waste as much. However, it poisons it. Now, even if they didn't do that and they created the Roundup and the GMO seeds, it's a poison. So literally, we are all poisoned by the wheat. Now, going back to my wife, which is she has again, if she let any wheat or any type of these allergens, or in particular wheat, anything with gluten, especially American gluten, gets into her body, immediately within minutes she starts to notice it, and then days later she will swell up and her joints hurt and she aches, and her guts get messed up. She'll throw up, she gets massive headaches and things like that. Same thing with MSG. But when we went to this place, she said, and they assured us, yes, this is wheat that only comes, very special wheat for making these croissants, and it only comes from France, and it's glyphosate free and everything like that. She ate that and had zero problems. Zero. And again, I think it was the first time that she ever ate wheat, especially in like 20 years. First time she literally had a croissant, and she had zero reaction, and it was delicious and it was wonderful, but never again, right? Because you can't get this here in America. So going back to what I'm saying is this is so twisted up that when people say, well, I have these allergies, do you really have an allergy to a food, or do you have an allergy to the poison, which is, it's not an allergy, it's really a toxic reaction, and you are the canary in the coal mine. Why doesn't everyone have this reaction? Everyone should, because it's just everyone's immune system's been dumbed down, and if you're fed a poison, you should have a reaction. So this is really hard to figure out. So let's go over what is the main symptoms. How do you know that you have a food allergy? So it would be when you eat something, a lot of times pay attention to yourself, have someone pay attention to you, and you immediately will get post-nasal drip. Literally within 5 to 10 minutes, you'll start to get snuffy and your nose will start to flow. Bloating after eating, that can literally be, 15 minutes to an hour, and it's literally, you bloat up like a balloon ball. Fatigue, you eat and it's that, literally an hour after eating, you're like, oh God, I just feel tired, I feel drained. Burping, I know people even, and I'm like this too, which is I can drink a glass of water and I can start burping, right? It's gotten better, but I had a lot of these food problems. Sneezing, again, people will start sneezing, start coughing. Headache, literally starting to get the headache after and it can be even migraines, which we could say, oh, I've got migraines and I'm on this medication. How do you know it's not a food allergy, a food sensitivity? Post-nasal drip, I start clearing the throat. I start to get that type, like I get start blowing my nose. Intestinal gas, you get farty. Again, the gas, in terms of if you have the gas from behind, which is flatulence, if it smells, if it's stinky, typically that means you're not digesting protein. And if it doesn't have a smell to it, it's just gas, typically you're not digesting carbohydrates. Brain fogginess and memory problems. A lot of times people, I'm just getting old or something like that. How do you know you've just not been poisoning your brain? Okay. So often food allergy stems from organ toxicity and infection. Again, you can go to almost every show and I bring up some form of infection. If it involves the immune system, if we have a pain, inflammation, body reaction, in particular an allergic reaction, that's your immune system. And your immune system is not being dumb and overreacting. It is reacting correctly to something that you just poisoned it with, okay? So, and again, it's sometimes our bucket gets full. Your liver is a sponge. It is a filter. Your kidneys are a filter. And when we get gallstones and when we get kidney stones, that's because those filters have been filtering so many toxic waste that it eventually, like the HEPA filter on your vacuum cleaner, when that gets full, the suction stops, and so you have to clean that filter out. So many times when people are, I'm fine, I can eat this, I don't have a reaction, and suddenly you start having a reaction, again, it tips the scales, your bucket is full. So cleaning out the liver, cleaning out the kidneys is often a way to, how do I reduce this? How do I get to a point where I'm not having these reactions? Liver, gallbladder, kidney, and colon need to detox. Okay, your guts need to detox. Commonly weak adrenals, especially when we constantly are poisoning ourselves or having an immune reaction, that triggers your adrenals to kick in. Adrenals are the fight or flight response. And so on those days that you have, for instance, the reaction like the stuffiness or the nasal nasal drip, or I'm weak, or I've got fatigue, or I've got the headache. Those are the days that your immune system goes, wake up, dummy, you're dying. And so you go into a adrenal. Well, you're basically kicking your horse, well, or whipping your horse. And, you know, if you whip your horse too much, it's going to be exhausted. And it's overexhausted. You know, again, driving up behind a person that rides the gas and rides the brake, as opposed to just coasting. You know, you can see a person that's really hard on the engine, and it's really hard on the adrenals. So the adrenals are always being kicked in. Your thymus. Your thymus is your immune system. It's right behind here. It's the main, it's basically like I call it the pentagon for all of your immune system. We have all these different types of immune organs that are throughout your body, but the thymus, which is behind your sternum, thump your thymus, that helps to stimulate it. That is, like I said, it's the pentagon. It produces the T cells and all kinds of other things, thyroxine and all this other, what you would call hormones, but they are part of your immune system. And it's the main, like I said, the pentagon, where everything goes to there, and it helps to regulate and deliver the instructions on how to handle your lymph, how to handle your white blood cells, how to handle your red blood cells. And then we have other organs like your spleen, that cleans up your blood and all this other stuff. But the thymus, when it's always facing immune stress, it can become weak, and literally it can become overburdened. And how do you fix that? So a lot of times when we've gone through these things, when we get into, like, I was a kid and I could eat anything that I wanted, and now I have problems. Well, you were eating poisons as a kid, poisons to you, poisons to everybody, and your filter systems were working, your thymus was working, and when you're strong, you don't notice it. You don't really have a symptom. And so you think that's healthy, but really it's not. And then when you then develop these intolerances and things like that. So what are the top ones, the 8 most common ones, which would be cow's milk, that would be a dairy, that would be a lactose intolerance. But there's 2 things that are inside milk, and that would be lactose. And ose means it's a sugar. So typically when people get really gassy and very stinky gas after eating ice cream or drinking milk, that's the lactose. And it means the same thing that happens with people that get very gassy from beans, because that's a long chain sugar, what's called the oligosaccharides and everything like that. And your body's machines, digestion, has to break these up into smaller bits. And so people that cannot digest the lactose is because it stays in these long chain sugars. And the reason that we get gassy is because what it's doing is it's feeding bacteria, yeast and other bacteria, and they're eating it before you can that you can digest it, and they produce a lot of waste products. They literally get to it and then turn it into a bunch of junk, which is then poisons that then causes your immune system to go, ba-ba-da-da, we're here, you know, the cavalry rides in. So people get gassy and bloaty and stuff like that. That's not the allergy, that's your reaction, that's your immune system going in to diffuse the bomb. That is literally, you know, your forces going in. Someone called us, and they show up, and, you know, the commandos come in and they attack it, okay? Eggs is another one. Okay. Oh, let me go back to the cow's milk, okay? So there's 2 things in it. One would be the lactose, that's the sugar. And then another thing that we have is what's called casein. And casein is a protein. And that's where there's A1 and A2. And sometimes people can actually they make a milk that comes from what's called A2 cows. And A2 is a genetic type of, so most cows here in America are what's called A1, because the A1 cows, the cows that have the genetic that produce the A1 casein, they produce a lot more milk. They literally have gallons more. So the A2 ones have been phased out because they don't produce as much milk. However, the A2 are ones that tend to have less. So if you're allergic to the proteins, people that switch to the A2 milk, that's the particular type of protein, some people, if they're allergic to the protein, they can switch to an A2 and they don't have problems. So either you're allergic to the sugars or you're allergic to the A2. Or it's just in general, again, even the A2 milks or A1 or whatever, think about what the cows are eating. The cows are eating glyphosate, wheat, and all this other crap. And so if you really want to figure out what the problem is, and the best way for many people is to switch to either a different milk, get a good dairy, meaning the grass-fed that are on a non-GMO, and you really got to do your homework. Or we can get into goat's milk, sheep's milk, these other different types of milk. Even here in America, there's available camel's milk. It's very expensive. But if you get people that want to test, like I really want to get dairy and I've tried all these other things, you can play with the dairy and see if you can. And some people, ultimately, it is the dairy no matter what it is, and they're always going to have an allergy to it. Eggs, we can also get into crappy eggs, like the general, when they say cage-free, that just means they're not stacked in a cage on top of each other, pooping on each other. They're still in a building. So really the best eggs would be what's called a pasture-raised egg. If you're going to buy them in a store, you're going to buy them from a person like me, where you can go and verify and go, there they are. I see those chickens. They're outside all day long. And you know, you're not feeding them a bunch of grains, that they're browsing and eating worms and digging in the dirt and stuff like that. Oh, the eggs are so amazing. Very, very clean eggs. And so sometimes people, now if you want to buy them in the store, it's what's called pasture raised. Pasture raised is the legal term, because cage free is the legal term, which means you think that means they're out on the range. No, cage free means they're still actually in a building and they're actually standing on concrete. They're just not on cage on top. So it's a bunch of legalese mumbo jumbo, and it's not what you think. Tree nuts, okay, a lot of the tree nuts, walnuts, pecans, I mean, just take your pick on all these tree nuts. Now, peanuts is another one. Peanut is not a nut. Peanut is a legume. And most time people are having an allergy to what's called the aflatoxin, that's also in bread, and it's mold. And everyone's allergic to aflatoxin, black mold that grows on. And when they harvest peanuts, because they grow underground, some of them get too wet and they form this mold. And they don't have a person separating with an eye, picking it out and going, oh no, get rid of that one. They literally just have these machines. And then when it turns into peanut butter, a lot of the stuff gets ground into it. And the aflatoxin, like a mold, is growing inside your peanut jar while it's sitting on the shelf. And so many times people are having an allergy, especially when you get into the real serious peanut allergy. It's an aflatoxin, meaning it's the black mold that's inside there. And so peanuts are really, especially peanut butter, can be very, very toxic for people. There has been some recommendations. Dr. Hulga Clark, who wrote those books on the cure for cancer and stuff like that, and found that it was all parasites and also the aflatoxin mold. She recommended that you take the ascorbic acid. Again, if people can tolerate it and they don't have these really bad peanut allergies, is you can basically sanitize and kill the mold in a peanut butter by taking, I forget what the measure is. You can look it up, Dr. Hulda Clark, and it's ascorbic acid, the vitamin C powder, and it's a little bit of the powder that you can buy on health food store, and put it in and mix it in, and that kills the aflatoxin if you have to have peanut butter. Okay. Shellfish is another one. What are we talking shellfish? We're talking basically shrimp. We're talking, mussels and the bottom feeders. And a lot of times that's what they're having a toxic reaction to, is not necessarily the shellfish, but all the toxins that are in the mud that these things are eating. And that's why in the Bible they talked about don't eat those things, because the bottom feeders is basically, they have a lot of toxicity, heavy metals, mercury, all kinds of things, which is, no person is going to become immune or not immune to these things. It's all mixed together, and you kind of go, how do you know what you're having a reaction to? If you're having a reaction to a toxin like a heavy metal or a mold or cadmium or arsenic, that's a poison to a living thing. And if that thing is mixed in there, then you don't really want to eat that. And you don't want to go, well, I want to get rid of this allergy. No, so again, cleaning the food up is the number one thing. And no one's really done that. So it's really difficult to figure out what is really going on. Soy is one of these things that are in there. Again, soy is a very high glyphosate, has lots of poisons in it. Wheat As I talked about the wheat, again, it has lots of poisons, and I've seen people, including my wife, that when they ate a non-toxic certified from France, meaning we don't do that here, it's illegal, and they made it illegal for them to be in their fields. Italy is another place that does this, which is especially the really high value durum wheat for the really, really good pasta, which you cannot buy here in America, unless you're a very good importer, but it's very, very difficult to get in here. Those are the wheats that don't have that type of stuff. And I've known people who have a gluten allergy and have eaten those ones and like, this is amazing. I mean, it's fixed. But then they go back to the American wheat or the Canadian wheat, and their allergies are all back. So it's not the wheat, it's actually the poison. And fish. Again, fish can have lots of toxicities in them. But again, let's get into, let's say these are not poisons. Let's say you have the most cleanest, wonderful fish and you're still having an allergic reaction to it. Then that means that it is a true immune system reaction to the proteins that are in that. And again, that's where most of the food allergies kind of come from, is a mix of the proteins. Now, what's also a protein? A bacteria is a protein, a virus is a protein, a yeast is a protein. So our bodies are triggered or basically on high alert to these things that are proteins, because a parasite is a protein. And that's one of the things I also find that is also mixed in this is infection, is you may have a parasite, and that the parasite is eating these foods inside of you, also eating you and releasing toxins. They're pooping inside you, which is creating again, everyone is allergic to these toxic things. Now we have systems in our body, these filter systems, including a whole arsenal of Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force inside our body. That's called our immune system. And when you're healthy enough and strong enough and have the full minerals and great life force, your body does it in the background and you don't even notice it. You maybe even get a sniffle and then it's gone. But as this happens and as this goes on and on and on, as you keep poisoning it, eventually these systems break down, and that's when a person is having an allergy. Now we get into some of the other things which are off this list but are kind of involved, and that's sesame and other seeds. Okay. One of the things in particular of the seeds, when we're talking about, let's say, pumpkin seeds and let's say almonds, especially California almonds, are very, very toxic. It's one of the most heavily pesticided foods. The most heavily pesticided foods in the world are California grapes and raisins and almonds. And that's where most of the almonds are grown. Most of the tree nuts are grown there. And they spray the crap out of them on just the chemicals and everything like that. So it's the chemicals that are in there. But the other thing is many times people have to take different nuts, including the tree nuts, which would be like, say, walnuts and pecans. And it's best to get them in their raw state. Don't buy them roasted, buy them raw. But I've had people who, even raw almonds or raw cashews, it causes a problem and it causes the bloating and stuff like that. There's a special chemical in there that are what's called phytates. Now let me explain this with seeds. And again, a lot of times when people are getting healthy and they go to the health nut foods, they go to a lot of the nuts, and that can make people even worse. And they go, oh, I don't understand. Well, the phytates is, let me explain something to you. Okay, take a plant. Take a plant that produces a seed. Now that seed then dries up and then falls into the ground. And so most seeds will not germinate, meaning will not wake up from its deep sleep and then form the leaves and the roots and become the tree until it's dried out. That's the whole process of nature, is that it dries on the vine, and then when it falls into the ground, it then rehydrates, meaning water goes into it. Now that triggers a mechanism, and every seed is its own likeness, okay? So let's say you have a plant and it drops its seed. So let's say almonds. Almonds then drop onto the ground, okay? And then there's almonds. So let's say if we buried it into the ground and you looked at a square inch of ground, you would have some almond seeds in there. You would have some grass seeds in there. You would have other, so it's different types. Well, every seed does the same thing, which is when it hydrates. When water goes into it, it triggers a mechanism, and its first thing is it releases these chemicals called phytates, and each one has its own particular type. And what it does is phytates literally is a war of, like, basically it goes to a seed that's not of its kind. So the almond seed will release a chemical, and that will then touch the grass seed. Now the grass seed also releases a chemical. What these chemicals do to the seed structure is it blocks in particular calcium and other minerals, because it's a tug of war, or it's a fighting, and it's a slapping match, which is who's going to win, because they're vying for ground. And the one that's able to block that other one from receiving nutrients will then get a leg up or a leg down, meaning its roots will go in. So let me explain this to people, which is, if you eat a raw seed and it goes into your mouth, even if it's ground up in your smoothie, the water that's there, or the water in your mouth, or the water in your stomach hydrates it. And even if it's broken up into tiny bits, they're all programmed to do this same thing, which is it releases this chemical war. And then that goes into your guts. And so a lot of leaky gut problems and absorption problems, especially people that eat lots of nuts, and they go, that's my problem. When I stopped eating the nuts, my problem went away. It's because they stopped these phytates. Now, there is a little secret of what you can do to this, which is, especially when people are very sensitive to these types of things, what you do is you take raw nuts. So let's say your raw almonds, your raw organic almonds or cashews. Organic means it doesn't have chemicals on it. And what you do is, before you eat them, you soak them in purified water, distilled water, or not sink water that has, tap water that has other chemicals. So your spring water or something like that. And you soak them for at least 20 minutes or overnight. And then you take them, and if you're going to throw them into your smoothie, you can just throw them hydrated. Or if you want them dried out, you can then put them on like a pan and put them in your oven, and put your oven on the lowest setting with the door cracked. And you can then toast them or put them in your dehydrator or something like that. And then they can dry out, and then they're nice and crunchy like you like them. But why? Because the phytates go into, and don't drink that water, pour that water out that you soak them. Same thing can be done with beans. And what it does is it tricks that chemical to go into that water, and then once it's released into the water, then it's gone, and it's been pulled out of that seed. And so now you dump that water, and then, like I said, you can then toast them up, and now you can eat them, and now that doesn't release these things. The gluten, there's a lot of other plants other than just wheat that has gluten in it. Celery is another thing that it's one kind of lower on the list. Sulfite, so that's the thing that is added to wine in order to stop the fermentation process, because if you don't, then it will keep going on and the wine will go bad in the bottle. Aspirin and salicylates, there is different particular allergies to that. MSG, monosodium glutamate, and in particular the monosodium glutamate, that's in Doritos and what's called natural flavors, and you'll see it says MSG. What it does is it literally is a neurotransmitter. It basically tricks your brain, your tongue, into believing things taste sweeter or saltier or tastier or garlickier or whatever. So they don't have to add as much of those things. It makes things taste more. It's a lot of Asian foods. But it also causes brain swelling. This is one of the things that's also been linked with autism, again, hypersensitivity or hyperactive kids. Is they eat too much of this stuff, and it makes them go crazy. Okay, take these things out because it's a poison. Okay, so let's go back to, I've talked on all these different things that are the big topic things. And so one of the number one things that a person can do, which is, I don't know what my problem is. So what you do is, the very first thing is eliminate. Do an elimination diet, because there's a lot of different things that we could also be allergic to. And again, or it's feeding something inside of ourselves. So sugar is another one top thing. Is sugar, everyone's allergic to sugar? Not really. Everyone's allergic to the sugar that feeds another living life form that feeds off of the sugar. That would be virus, bacteria, and in particular yeast, so the candida. And they are putting waste products into them that we are poison to that. So one of the best diets, which is, well, then what can I eat? Because everything has all this stuff in it. No. The meat and greens, Okay, beef and broccoli. Now let me describe why. Because number one, the beef is a very non-toxic food. It's very easy to digest. People kind of go, but I don't like the meat or something like that. Again, there's not enough sugar in it to grow any type of yeast. It doesn't really feed the virus, that type of stuff. Yes, it can feed off of these other things. But again, your body will, so it has all of the essential protein and minerals and especially good grass-fed beef has also the essential fatty acids in it and stuff like that. So it's a basic food that will feed you, but not feed the other living life forms. And then the broccoli is because the broccoli has all of the phytonutrients, the minerals, the green type of stuff feeds your body, but it doesn't have any sugars. So again, you can make an alcohol. So a lot of times too is when we're dealing with the bloating is we're producing carbon dioxide in your body, especially when it's from sugar, because you brew beer with wheat or barley or something like that, which has lots of sugar in it. And then you put yeast in that, and that yeast then feeds on that, which produces carbon dioxide and alcohol. So one of the most common issues of how do I know I have a toxicity with the liver is what's called fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver. I've talked about this before. There's alcoholic fatty liver, meaning a person's a legitimate alcoholic and they drink too much alcohol and it causes stress on their liver, and then their liver becomes fatty and then it becomes scarred and then develops cirrhosis and all this other stuff. But there are other people going, I don't understand. I've got fatty liver, or I've got cirrhosis of the liver, but I don't drink. But they do drink if they have too much yeast in their body and all of the sugar feeds it. So a meat and greens is a really good diet. Doesn't have any dairy, doesn't have any nuts, doesn't have anything. It just has basics in terms of you're getting your food groups in terms of the meat and your greens, and it's non-allergic. Most people are not allergic to any of the cruciferous of the broccoli, and it's something you can live on. You can do it for about 2 weeks to 2 months sometimes when people are really recalcitrant. And if you have any of these allergies from these things, it will make that go away. And then what you then start doing is you start phasing things in, and you bring a thing in. So you bring in anything on this list, a nut or a dairy or something like that. And then by that time, you will have then, you know you're going to have a problem, because you will have a problem immediately within minutes. You'll start to get snuffy, or let's say within that day, you start to, if you have any of these reactions that you had before, then you know that you don't have a problem with, that you have a problem with it. So you take it out and you keep it out. Now, if you don't have a problem with it and you can tolerate, then that goes back on the list and you can start adding this. Now, there's some other things that we can do in terms of when we get into what are the organs that are, remember I talked about organ toxicity. If it's liver reactions, we can do the gallbladder ND, max stress B, which is all of the B vitamins, and that supports what's called phase 1, 2, and 3 liver detoxification. It will clean your liver out. I've seen that really help. Another good liver detoxifier is N-acetylcysteine and glutathione. These are these, now I have to take the glutathione because I have an allergy to alcohol. If I drink alcohol, I drink a beer or anything like, especially the ones that have the wheat in it, I will immediately get snuffy, and then my wife hates it, and especially if I drink any type of alcohol, and she's like, you didn't take your, oh, for 2 days, you're gonna be all snotty, and especially waking her up in the middle of the night. So if I take 4 glutathione before I drink alcohol, I don't have problems. And now some alcohols, like I can't do red wine. I love red wine, but the sulfites creates a massive headache, so I just can't do it. But those are liver reactions. Now, when we get into kidney reactions, these are the filters in your body. Renoven is really helpful for that. Mediclay, which is that's a bentonite clay, and that helps to absorb toxins. Chem Detox, which is what's called a modified citrus pectin, that also is like a sponge and it will absorb toxins. And again, the toxins not just from you or from the foods, but also from the waste products that is coming, or the what's called endotoxins, because if your body has to kill something or repair something that's damaged. So let's say people eat some sort of, a lot of the bloating that comes from certain foods is if you saw what was going on inside. So some of the other conditions, which would be, let's say, ulcerative colitis, meaning when they scope you and you see you're all red and bloody on the inside, or people that are having, let's say, the celiac, which is really bad celiac, that's the wheat allergy. People will have bloody stools. Literally, it's like you just swallowed nails and blood's coming out of you. Why? Because that's damage. Well, these broken blood cells and broken tissues release these what's called endotoxins. So things to absorb the endotoxins, the mediclay and the gemtetox, again, tends to bring these reactions down. The thymus, remember I talked about the thymus. If your immune system is constantly going after something, and let's say you clean up the diet and we do the elimination diet, I get better, but I'm still having some reactions, is because I have to clean up and basically de-escalate and debrief these organs. So the thymus is the nucleotides, is really good for that. That is, the nucleotides is what the DNA is made out of, so it helps you to produce new DNA, new cells, basically out with the bad and in with the good. Thymex, which is, comes from standard process. It's actually made from thymus glandulars from animals, which is, again, people can poo-poo that, but you go back to the ancients, and including even people that are living right now, the Indians, the Chinese, the Cambodians, a lot of the world basically says, if you got a problem with the organ, eat that organ. You got bad knees, eat some knees. You got a bad thymus, eat some thymus. The whole idea in terms of even standard processes, it can provide what's called protomorphogens, and basically they extract the cellular and just keep the information from the cell, and it's the how to rebuild that tissue. Congoplex is another one. So for infections, and in particular for these organs, it helps to rebuild these organs. I've got a question here on YouTube that says, can you explain avocado allergies? Well, that's a tricky one, because avocados, a lot of times, how do you know what type of avocado? Because avocados are also, especially standard avocados, are very pesticided. They put lots of pesticides. So how do you know that you're having a reaction? So first of all is I would just go to organic avocados. Okay, and then there's two different types of avocados. There's the Hass avocados, and then there is the California avocado, the big ones and the little ones. So start playing with those avocados and see which one. And if you still have allergies to it, then again, it may be that these organs that you have, these filter organs, need to be cleaned out before. And so I would eliminate it, clean these organs out. Look, I'm going through right now, and then try it again. And again, try it with an organic one that doesn't have any toxins in it, and then start playing around with and then sometimes too, the allergies. Okay, an avocado is another good thing, is how do we know it's not the fat? And avocados are pure fat. And again, a good symptom of you are not digesting fats is you eat something that has fat in it and you get burpy and you feel like you got a lead weight that's sitting here. You get even the allergy in terms of the nasal allergies. That's because you have a gallbladder that's jammed up. And so when you eat anything that has fat, you can emulsify that. So I would say even trying the organic avocados, when you eat the avocado, you drink it with some water that has, number one, some limonene in it, which is this orange oil, very specific type of orange oil, and that helps to dissolve the fats. And then also mediclay. Mediclay would be something to absorb the toxins. And so if you still have the problem with that, then just eliminate it. But sometimes finding by actually, it's the parts of the food that I'm not digesting very well that I think is a allergic reaction, but it's because fat is just sitting like a glob on me because my gallbladder can't digest it. Let me get back to this, which is, okay, we said the thymus, okay, congoplex. Then we get into the adrenals. Again, when the person's in this fight or flight mechanism all the time, the adrenals. So for adrenals, it would be Adrenaven, that's Premier Research Labs, which helps to rebuild the adrenals. I also like standard process Drenamin. That provides actually some adrenal glands, and that one is spectacular as well in terms of literally helping to rebuild the adrenal glands. And then we get into digestion. So again, it could be my guts, it could be my whole digestion process, and that would be HCl, hydrochloric acid, for the stomach. that would be digest, which is the digestive amylase, protease, lipase, all this other stuff. Then they also make another one called digestase SP, which is that has serrapeptidase, and serrapeptidase has been shown for people with allergies to really help to fix that. Then there's another one, if I can't digest protein, remember I said if you can't digest fat, that is the limonene. It's also lecithin. Lecithin actually is an emulsifier. If I can't digest protein, which my wife couldn't for a long time, that's why she was vegan, but then we put her on protease, which is protease digest protein, and now she can digest protein, and then her body went, oh, me need protein. And then that's why we started raising our own animals, because, you know, we couldn't even buy the stuff that was good enough. And now she really thrives on meat, but that's because we fixed her ability to digest it. Sometimes it's the pancreas, and we cannot digest release enough insulin, or release too much insulin, and there's a number of different things to help with that. And then we get into the phytates. We talked about soaking the nuts. And then there's another thing too, is a lot of times it can be actually a parasitic infection. So I've seen the help of the peristat and the peritocin. Peristat particularly helps with the amoebas, and it depends upon what type of parasite. Peristat is good for the amoebas, the single-celled organisms, and the worms, like the roundworms and hookworms and these types of things. The peritocin helps with the liver flukes, the flatworms, and these types of things. And I've seen that help an awful lot, because again, when people have said, I've done the elimination diets, I've done all this and it doesn't work. Well, again, what you're having an allergic reaction to or an immune system reaction to is, it doesn't matter what you feed it, even if it's perfect, you're feeding something else that is creating a toxin inside of you. And so you have to kill these things and literally sanitize them and do a war and get rid of them, so that then your system doesn't have a reaction to what they're producing, okay? Then sometimes we get into energy, okay? There's sometimes, again, the energy that's on things. That's when we get into what's called encoding. A lot of, when we test energetically the foods, is that it goes into a lot of the foods, especially the fruits and vegetables, including avocados, they go through a gamma X-ray radiation. They literally become sanitized, or they go through the machines that scan them. And what these do is they embed them with these subtle energies. Premier Research Labs makes this little disc that you can put on the phone, which is called they make a 3.0 for older phones, and they make a 5.0 for newer phones, and it tapes on the back of your phone. And I know this sounds crazy for people, but again, the energy, you can test this and you can see this, and you can unencode your foods. Or you can fix your house with a Vastu, so that now when it goes into your refrigerator, because a lot of times even the refrigerator is creating this energy. Basically, it's like a smog, an energetic smog, like EMF, or it's more than that, and it literally is affecting the cellular or DNA matrix, energy matrix of that food. So you can use the phone for unencoding, basically go over the food that you get from the grocery store and basically take that phone and just sweep it over it for a couple seconds, and you can test it and you will see that it unencodes it. A lot of times too, it's not the food, but it's you. Your system is all screwed up. And where does people spend most of their time, especially not eating, is in bed. A lot of times when you have a person sleeping in bed, you can use EMF meters, and when your headboard is right up against the wall, especially if it's against the wall where there is an outlet right there, you can see that all night long it's bathing, and that, you know, in poisoning your brain, poisoning how you digest things, poisoning how your neurologic system. And then if you couple that with a person with their head facing north, is it's pulling energy out of your body, and it's literally stressing your body. So bed positioning, get a compass out and find, in the best position is to, number one, is head facing south or east, even west, but south is usually the best one. And in particular, if it's against a wall, an outside wall, or a wall where there is an outlet, get that headboard away. And I know people, it kind of messes I used to sleep on my bed backwards, and that made a huge difference in my health. So if you have to have your head up against the wall, pull the headboard away from the wall at least 1.5 feet, if not even 3 feet away from the wall. But if you have a wall that doesn't have any electrical outlets and stuff like that that's behind it, that tends to fix it, right? Tends to kind of make it better. But if it's the way your bedroom is if it's got to be against that wall, then pull the bed away from the wall so that it's not, your head's not right against that little meter. Or if you put it even worse, which is a head with a headboard that's against a smart meter that's on the other side of the wall, oh, man, that is just doing major mojo on your whole energetic field, and it's just robbing you of energy all night long. And of course you're going to wake up in a panic and a stress, and everything's a poison for you. So I've gone through all of these different types of things of what you could do, but the most important thing would be, like I say, if you think you have a food allergy, how do I know? Is you get snuffy or these allergy or these reactions after you eat a food, is just go to an elimination diet. The meat and greens, beef and broccoli, okay? And just very simple. And do that for about 2 weeks. And then you'll know. You'll start to feel better. Sometimes people have to go about 2 months. And people go, oh, that's going to be so hard. I'm telling you what, if you are facing all kinds of things, you will notice a huge difference in terms of, it will be a huge relief, even though it's a pain in the butt in terms of being able to prepare that food or get stuff out, you know, and you're the person that just has to eat that way. And, you know, you're like the big pain in the butt with everybody. Hey, it will be hugely worth it if you start to identify what the problem is and then start to get better. And then you can phase these foods back in. And after about 2 weeks to 2 months, in real serious cases, you will know immediately when you put it back in. And if it causes a problem, you go, that's out, that's off the list, and I'm going to have to live without that, or just keep doing this until I clean myself up, and then maybe I can bring it back in. But if it's a poison, you don't want to poison, you know, don't poison the baby, right? Because again, the baby's getting sick. And if it's a hidden poison like that, you know, Sixth Sense, which is Munchausen by proxy, if she's poisoning the baby or poisoning your child, then of course she's throwing up all day long. But if it's not her and it's actually you doing it to you, that's worse. And most of the time it's just hidden to us and we don't know it. So the elimination diet is probably the most important thing with anybody with food allergies, is get back to base, and then you can start experimenting, and then you'll know and you'll figure out what it is. So until next time, this is Jason Eagle, your Natural Health Authority. Remember to like and subscribe and all that stuff. My website, strategichealing.us. And thank you so much for watching me, and share these videos to your friends and families. And until next time, thank you. Bye-bye.